So I've kind of intentionally changed how I talk about church. There was a time I used to talk about going to church or doing something with my church. And now I'm kind of at a point where I prefer to talk about being church. Because before, it was sort of like church was an add-on. It was something that you kind of chose to add into your life. Now I see it as more than that. It's what we are together.
When we meet together, each one has a song, a teaching, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. All these things must be done to build up the church.
This month, we are talking about how we are better together. We're better together as a community. That together, that we can share more love in this world, more light in this world than any one of us can, certainly. And that the whole of us is greater than our individual parts. So today I'm going to share with you a story. It's a true story of how God is making a difference because we come together as church. And it started almost exactly a year ago this Sunday with Grace Lightmark. Now, if you know Grace, she graduated from high school about a year and a half ago. And if you know Grace, she is a person that is so well named. Grace is a person who finds beauty and kindness in every place, including the messy ones. She is a wonderful young woman. And last year, we celebrated Grace's mom, Stacy, her wedding with Chris. I can't believe it's been already a year now, but they were married on a beautiful Sunday, on a beautiful Saturday in a park over in Shawnee. I had a great time. It was a beautiful day. Anyway, Chris and Stacy were starting their marriage together as empty nesters. And I think I can speak for them. That was something, I think they were both kind of ready for that. They have a lot of kids between the two of them. They were ready for empty nesting. Grace was getting ready to move out into her own apartment. And one of Grace's friends had taken up residence, though, in Stacy and Chris's basement. And so it was almost a year ago this Sunday where Stacy, on the way out of church, she kind of told me that she mentioned to me that Grace had a friend who, not to be confusing, is also named Grace, who was living with her. And it was complicated. Grace was escaping domestic violence at the hands of her parents. This Grace is transgender. And if you know the statistics, the Human Rights Campaign is recording increasing violence against transgender people. Dozens have been killed, and many, many are homeless. So I met with the new Grace. Now, honestly, I was honored that she would even meet with a Christian minister. The label Christian has earned skepticism and fear among many people, particularly in regards to LGBTQ. And I saw her bruises. Saw the black eye. And I will never understand how anyone, let alone a parent, can do that to a child. Grace was clearly in danger. Now, Grace had taken up refuge in Stacy's basement. Didn't have a job, and was so scared. And there is only one place in all of the Kansas City metro area where an openly transgender young person can even find shelter. And there was no room at the inn. I called every agency that I was aware of. Even agencies I thought might bend the rules just a little bit. I worked my network. Nothing. So I called Michelle. Michelle had been such an excellent youth group leader. She knew Grace Lightmark. She was trained, and she knows about messy situations. So she was my first call to somebody in this church community. And when I explained the situation and what was going on, she did something amazing. She immediately agreed to have Grace come live with her for a few months.
A Samaritan who was on a journey came to where the man was. When he saw him, he was moved with compassion. The Samaritan went to him and bandaged his wounds, tending them with oil and wine. Then he placed the wounded man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took 2 full days' worth of wages and gave them to the innkeeper. He said, "Take care of him, and when I return, I will pay you back for any additional costs." What do you think? Which one of these 3 was a neighbor to the man who encountered thieves? Then the legal expert said, "The one who demonstrated mercy toward him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise."
God puts people and situations into our lives. And Michelle did something extraordinary. She got involved in a messy, inconvenient situation. She took in a stranger, all in the name of compassion. Kirsten Phillips, we pray for her a lot. She lost her leg to the MRSA virus, and she suffered surgery after surgery. And Kirsten was just coming off yet another one of her surgeries, and she was having coffee with me in the Einsteins across the street. And she heard a little bit about what was going on. Grace actually came that Wednesday to coffee and joined me over there. And she offered to hire Grace. She needed a caretaker. So she offered to hire Grace, and even to kind of work to help teach her how to drive, maybe how to get licensed as a CNA so that she could have a steady income. This is so being church. Now, I'll be honest. This was not a straight path. There was still messiness and frustration, and things were not always smooth. Yet as summer approached, the simple fact that Grace had a roof over her head and that she didn't have to concentrate on her very survival meant that she could start thinking and figuring things out, making plans. So just a couple months ago, she left for college. She got enrolled in school and is off doing the things that she needs to be doing. But before she moved, one Sunday, and maybe you remember this Sunday, she sat in here. She came to a church service. First time she'd ever come to a worship service with us. And she came, and she heard a message of love and inclusion, and she had tears running down her face because she was in church. She was church. And I'm telling you, that Sunday when she was here, we worshiped God.
What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?
God's Holy Spirit worked through the people of this community to do a righteous thing, to save a life. But God wasn't done with us. Because as it is with God, we see blessing upon blessing. We pile up. The Colonial Church community had done a wonderful act of kindness. But God's Spirit wasn't done yet. See, I was frustrated because I was frustrated about how difficult it was to find a safe place for Grace and to get her the help that she needed. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if God's Spirit hadn't moved Michelle to be a Christian neighbor. So I talked to Edith Guthrie. She is our conference minister of the United Church of Christ here in Kansas City, Oklahoma. And I told her about my frustration. And she told me about a grant that we could apply for called the Be the Church grant that our conference was putting together these grants to offer to congregations. And see, this is even more Be the Church happening. It's happening within our wider community in the United Church of Christ. And so I took that idea to our outreach missions board. And I told them a little bit of the story about what had been going on. And Sherry Van Orman, our board outreach chair, and Russ Townsley, they got together and they put together a grant application. And I'm going to tell you something, we didn't get just the grant, we got more than we asked for. Now we could just use that money to help another young person out. That would be a great act of Christian charity. But God's Spirit had a different idea in mind. Something a little bigger. We called together a group of leaders from this congregation. Kathy's part of that, Peter's part of that, Russ. We came together with leaders from other congregations in the area too. And there aren't a lot of us, but we met together last summer. Now, Grace came to that first meeting, told her story, why we were doing this. And she wanted the experience of healing and safety that had saved her to be shared. And at that meeting, there was another young woman. Didn't know at the time, never met her. She had a similar story. She offered to put together a survey for area nonprofits to find out if we could find some potential partners. The survey was brilliant and we circulated it. But more than that, I sensed a powerful spirit in this young person. Now, there is something special about how God tends to use this Colonial Church community. We aren't huge. But with God's Spirit, a few people who are serving together as a team can work miracles. We have seen this. We know this. This is our story. We are a community that plants seeds. Today there is a medical clinic and an orphanage in Malawi that has saved so many lives, saving lives today. And it all started because one of our people had a friendship. Stacy Alderman had a friendship with Annie Alvarez. And because of that friendship, she asked, we got a well built in Malawi that led to an orphanage, which led to a medical clinic bringing the best first world medicine to that community. Think about what we heard a few weeks ago here and the work that we've done over the last couple decades in El Cajon, Honduras. Think about Carwu and artists helping the homeless and what they do every single day on the streets of our community. And it all begins with a seed of loving kindness, a loving kindness that saves. God uses the Colonial Church community to plant seeds of loving kindness that grow into oaks of righteousness and justice. That's what we do as a community. So Chelsea Daniels, she came to that meeting this summer. And I believe that the Spirit of God came on her, anointed her for a purpose. Chelsea is now the executive director of what we are putting together as a new nonprofit in the state of Kansas, the Transgender Youth Project. And it's going to be the first shelter that is open to transgender people in the state of Kansas. The seed funding that we help provide from that Be the Church grant has grown quickly. Just this last week, Chelsea and I had a meeting with a potential funder here in the Kansas City area who is going to help us hire staff. And tomorrow, we're actually meeting about the possibility of having a new building donated for the purpose, to be the shelter. When God's Spirit gets rolling, I have found it best just to step out of the way. Now, of course, there are going to be challenges to all of this, and there's always going to be messiness, but that is how Christ comes into the world. Christ comes into the middle of messiness. The Spirit comes to bring grace into the messes that we have. But what a privilege it is to carry, to be part of this ministry that changes and saves lives. What an honor it is to extend the influence of Christ into the world's messiness with the hope of kindness and justice. This is being church. This is what you're a part of. It's the work of a team, a church community of disciples, blessed by God to be a blessing, to be a neighbor. Next week, we're going to gather here for kind of the one holiday that we as congregation, with our congregational heritage, the one that we kind of own. It's Thanksgiving. And that's a big holiday for us, being the spiritual ancestors of the Pilgrims. And we're going to bring our gifts, those cards that we've had. You should have gotten those in the mail this week. Cards of support for the ministry of this church over the coming year. What can you share in the days ahead to offer hope and loving kindness? What we do together is a team sport. And this is what I can tell you. We may not be huge, and we need every person. Because it's working together as a team that we will work miracles. I have seen what we can do together. I have seen what God can do when God blesses the people of this community to work a mighty deed. And I can see what happens when we respond with the grace that's within us to the situations that God places in our lives. So bring your cards and your surveys next week, because you are an important part of what God is doing to build people up. Amen. Our service is to build people up, to work to bind up wounds in this world, and we begin with our baptismal vows. Those vows that take us to do love and justice in the world. And so let's honor that.